I would call tachyon a very, very high frequency. It's a frequency that travels faster than the speed of light. And in raising your vibration, you reconnect yourself with the all that is. This frequency, this very high energetic frequency, is in the air all around us. And a tachyon helps you to draw that into your body at a specific level that your body can cope with. So in theory, at 0 degrees Kelvin, because of the coldness, there should be no vibration coming out of that level of temperature world. When they started exploring 0 point energy, they discovered that more energy comes out of 0 point than can be accounted for. In fact, it is almost as if that is where all energy emerges from. So I've been fascinated with sacred geometry ever since being involved in the tachyons, and it's as if the tachyons have kind of pushed me into studying and learning more of the sacred geometry. That particular tachyon signaled a turning point in my life, and I found that I was understanding more and more and more about how the sacred geometry affects the body. And one of the first things that I noticed was a straight line and a circle. That's like the basis of sacred geometry. I looked at it and I thought, good Lord, that's binary. That is your computer code.
Greetings, seekers of ancient wisdom. We are back again talking about tachyons. This is a word that I had not even heard of a few months ago. And to talk about this very fascinating topic, I'm joined by Mary Martin. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Deepak. It's lovely to be here.
So, Mary, you are, in my view, the expert on tachyons in South Africa, because you've actually helped to promote this technology, I would call it, in South Africa. And I'm really perplexed to understand what a tachyon is. I have read through your website, and it has explained that it is energy at 0 point. You've used that word. But maybe explain, as you were explaining to a layperson, what is tachyons and why are they so special?
Tachyons, in general, are anything that is natural and that has been through a special process which then causes that natural element to become energized by altering the subatomic structure of that item that's being energized during the process. It makes the item become an aerial so that it can draw this tachyon energy out of the air. So the process to change the natural item, let us call it a glass item for convenience, would go through this special machine that then alters the subatomic structure of the glass in this instance. That glass then becomes an aerial for this energy which is in all the air around us. And it draws that energy out of the air and concentrates it into the item. And by wearing or using that item, your body can then absorb that energy from that item. And the atom never, ever, ever loses the energy because the subatomic structure has been altered permanently. Does that explain the very basics to you?
Yeah, that's actually a really good explanation. And are you saying the tachyon that you make it with a special machine and it's made from a special type of glass as well? It continues to draw energy from its surrounding, and that's what it does throughout its existence. Is that what it's doing?
I think a lot of people don't realize that in this air that we are surrounded by, there are TV signals, radio signals, Wi Fi signals, cell phone signals. This air is full of frequencies. And I would call tachyon a very, very high frequency. It's a frequency that travels faster than the speed of light. We are told that in our original human form, we were able to draw this energy out of the air. We've lost that ability over centuries. And tachyon is a way of us reconnecting with the frequencies, but because our bodies work at different Hertzian frequencies or just frequencies, it's not everybody's going to need the same frequency to raise their vibration. And in raising your vibration, you reconnect yourself with the all that is. And it is important to be connected to the all that is if you are going to maintain a healthy body, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And keeping your frequency high is essential to keep yourself well and also to keep your spiritual connection connected and growing. Because I believe that one of the reasons that we are on this planet is to actually grow ourselves into the very best version of ourselves that we could possibly be. And using tachyon as a frequency enhancer is one such way of raising your vibration. And therefore, if you remember that this frequency, this very high energetic frequency is in the air all around us, and a tachyon helps you to draw that into your body at a specific level that your body can cope with, that then assists you in keeping you healthy, connected, moving in that higher frequency where you are able to not only manifest things, but become the human being that is filled with love and compassion. Because I believe that that is where we all need to come from, is that love and compassion, where we are able to interact with each other on that level. And let's face it, the world certainly needs that at this time.
That's really beautiful. So the tachyon energy is really helping you. And I like the word that you use. You used energy enhancer or frequency vibration enhancer. It's going to help to enhance the body's vibe or Hertzian frequency. And we used to be able to do this. We used to be able to pull it from our surrounding. But because we've lost that ability, this is where the tachyon is a useful tool right now to help us. So let's go into this word that you used. I think you used it on your website. I don't know if you mentioned it today yet, but you talked about 0 point on your website. What is 0 point? Because it has become a bit of a buzzword, I would say, over the last few years, but I don't think people really understand what it truly means.
Right. Okay, the technical explanation is that when we reach a temperature of 0 degrees Kelvin, now that is a scientific term. We don't use Celsius or Fahrenheit. In the scientific world, they talk about 0 degrees Kelvin because that is a very much colder level. Everything that we are aware of that is in the world around us, it all vibrates. Everything vibrates. Whether we can feel it or not, there is a vibration. So, in theory, at 0 degrees Kelvin, because of the coldness, there should be no vibration coming out of that level of temperature. Nothing at all. It should be totally still. Yet, most alarmingly to the scientific world, when they started exploring 0 point energy, they discovered that more energy comes out of 0 point than can be accounted for. In fact, it is almost as if that is where all energy emerges from. And it is an area that it has been written about. The mathematics of 0 point and tachyon energy has been well described by um, Eric West in a big book available from Amazon. But this is the fact: is 0 point energy is where this energy actually comes from, where it is generated out into the layers of air and atmosphere around us. And it slowly, from 0 point, filters down into the tachyon level. And then once it comes through the tachyon level, it comes down into the area where our bodies can use it, if our bodies were enabled to use it. And this is where using a tachyon comes in, because that then draws that level of energy into the body. And that's what you want to happen. Now, when you start using tachyon energy, because it is strong, your body needs to adapt to drawing that energy in. And over a period of time of using tachyon, your body will start to vibrate at the level of the pendant or tachyon tool that you are using. And once your body is using that energy, you will notice a difference within yourself, within the way in which you interact with other people. So the 0 point energy is the start of it all. And a lot of work is being done on 0 point energy right at the moment by the scientific community, which is beyond the use of tachyons. They are working with supercomputers, superconductivity, elements that go beyond what we are using it for. So there is a lot of new technology being developed using 0 point energy, mainly because 0 point energy travels faster than the speed of light.
That is something I'm still going to struggle to get my head around, that something can actually travel faster than the speed of light. So I love the explanation. So 0 point actually refers to 0 Kelvin in temperature, which I think is minus 276 or something, minus something like that degrees Celsius. And I remember that from high school physics, right? Or high school science, that Kelvin is when everything, all the elements actually would be frozen. So even the elements that take the coldest temperature to be frozen at Kelvin, they're all frozen, which means physically there's no movement physically, but yet there is still some energy emanating from natural stuff at that temperature.
There's more energy emanating out of 0 degrees Kelvin than any value of Kelvin. And it was interesting that Roger Penrose, very well-known physicist, he actually discovered that the formation of, or what caused the energy to come out of 0 point, was the combination of two sacred geometric forms, one the octahedron and the other the cube. And he discovered that the cube octahedron together would form and then it would collapse, and it would form and collapse, but so fast. And that is what causes this energy to emerge out of 0 degrees Kelvin, is this cube octahedron. If you imagine a four-sided pyramid, a double four-sided pyramid, and where the bases meet are squares. So if you imagine a octahedron and it collapses into a cube, and then it reforms into an octahedron and it collapses into a cube, that is exactly the mechanism that causes all of this energy to be emitted from 0 point.
So I think this is a good time to show our viewers a tachyon that I got from Mary. So I went for a consultation session with Mary, and she chose this particular tachyon for me because she's got a whole bunch of tachyons that you can choose from. And it's a special thing to choose a tachyon for someone because the energy has to align with that person, doesn't it? And you've got a special diagram on this particular one that you gave for me. It looks like a triangle, three circles of some sort. So yeah, maybe let's talk about the tachyons.
Okay, so when I don't select a tachyon for you. What we do is we ask for the individual's full names and date of birth. And using that information, we call on your higher self. Because for us to indicate what is suitable for you would not be appropriate. Similarly, it wouldn't be appropriate for you to choose your tachyon because you would be doing so with perhaps two of your bodies, your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual bodies, and you might be drawn to one that wouldn't be the correct vibration for you. Bearing in mind you needing to raise your vibration, but you've got to do it correctly. Because if it's not done correctly, it affects your chakra system, which is, of course, nobody would want that to happen. So what we do with the details of your full name and your date of birth is we dowse or use kinesiology to connect with your higher self. And once we connected with your higher self, we ask your higher self to indicate the very best tachyon for you. And once we have that connection and we have the correct tachyon, we double check with your higher self that this is correct, and then we ask your higher self how you should wear that energy to integrate that energy into your body in a way in which, pardon me, that your body can use that energy without overwhelming you. Because that is also important. If you are going to wear something energetic and it overwhelms you and you're not quite with it, that's not assisting you at all. So this is where we give you wearing times to get used to that energy, and those wearing times are given to us by your own higher self, because your higher self knows what is best for you. And what I sometimes explain to people who don't understand the concept of higher self, I ask them to imagine that they are connected to, as they, let's say, driving along a road, that they have an imaginary helicopter above them or drone which can see ahead. It can see what is coming up. And might be you're driving very fast and there's a hill, and on the other side of the hill there could be an accident and all the cars have come to a stop. Your higher self can see those cars have come to a stop, but you physically don't know this. And then you get this warning. And if you're intuitive, you're going to pick up on the warning and you're automatically going to slow down. And as you approach the accident, you'll be quite safe. But if you're not connected, if you're not aware, you're going to go screaming over that hill and might get involved in a further accident yourself. So that is just the analogy that I use to explain to people the connection that we have with our higher self, that it can see more than what we can see. And that is why we choose to use the higher self to indicate the tachyons that you should use.
So, how many different types of tachyon designs have you got? So, you've got this one, which is like a half sphere, right? And it's got this image on it. How many different designs have you got?
Okay, so in those ones like you have, we have five, four. I think we have 11 off the top of my head. 5 and 4, 9, 10. I think we have 11. Um, Then there were the 4 original designs. The 4 original designs were a very small tube torus, a large tube torus, which is a donut shape. A torus is a donut shape. There's the traditional tree of life, and there is a what they call a madrigon, which is a triangular shape with the reverse triangular shape removed from the center. So, in effect, it actually is a Star of David, but it looks like a 3-sided triangle. So, those were the original 4. Then we were given the first, through channel, we were given the first 5 orbs. The next 4 orbs came from, I read 3 books, and all 3 books had the same specific sets of numbers incorporated within the stories. That they were non-fictional books. And I realized that when I was reading the 3rd book that I was seeing these numbers, but in the form of a orb. So that range of pendants we call the orbs. We have, since I've seen you, we've now started incorporating a new set of pendants. These are pendants that have the sacred geometric picture done in a 24 karat gold. And the tachyon itself is a flat glass with faceted edges. So it's very beautiful. So this is something brand new that we've just incorporated since the end of April. So yes, we've got 12 now, you could say. And there's a new tree of life that came out, which has also got physical gold incorporated, and it's a mini tree of life. So you could say we have 13 new shapes that we use.
Amazing. And each one is unique, right? Each one has a unique kind of conductivity or energy pulling characteristic, and it also aligns with a person's energy. So they're all very, very unique and very special. So let's get into the sacred geometry, because this is where I really feel is the crux, or how source communicates information between different layers of manifestation. Because there's a very famous experiment with salt, and they call it a Cialdini plate. So they have like a sound generating plate, and they connect it to a frequency generator. They put some salt on it, and when they turn the frequency generator on, the salt immediately starts moving and taking on a certain sacred geometric shape. And they notice that as you turn up and play higher frequencies, that shape becomes more complex, and I would even say more beautiful and more intricate, and more complex is the best word. And the amazing thing is, if you were to take the salt off and put a new layer of salt on and play the same frequency, you will get the same shape again. So there's a relationship between the shape and a frequency. And I've come to realize that also with the water experiments that Dr. Masaru Emoto did, in the 90s, where he took pictures of water crystalline structures, and he could see those were also influenced and changed depending on the frequency of the environment. So if you were to play heavy metal music or write sinister words or say ugly things, the actual crystal in the water would change to something ugly. It actually became just a blob when he used bad, negative words. And then when you use positive words or love, or it was high frequency natural water, the actual crystal of that water molecule was beautiful. So sacred geometry is present, throughout a lot of the research that I've done, even the medicines that I make, because I make radionics medicine, and that's frequency charged um, medicine. I charge either sugar pellets or alcohol or oils, that type of stuff. And that also, in my understanding and through my research, is changing the shape of the molecules in that substance. And that carries information. And that's the information that is now imprinted into this substance. And tachyons, you've explained the sacred geometric structures collapsing. There's actually two of them, like, from a cube to that octahedron, and continuously shifting between those two at a very fast pace. And that creates the energy in the research that you've come across. So let's talk about sacred geometric shapes, because this is such a fascinating topic. I love the idea of these beautiful shapes and structures, and how is it actually carrying information?
So, what you were describing about using salt, you can even use water or fine sand on a plate and then vibrating it using music or sound. That is called cymatics. It was discovered by Dr. Hans Jenny, and it's a very well known way of showing how vibrations actually produce the sacred geometry. So I've been fascinated with the sacred geometry ever since being involved in the tachyons, and it's as if the tachyons have kind of pushed me into studying and learning more of the sacred geometry. Because I must admit, when I first started with the four original shapes of tachyons, I never really knew much about sacred geometry, but this is the curious thing about working with tachyons. As you're raising your vibration, your mind starts to open into all these other fields, which are all obviously part of the whole. And once I started to become interested in the sacred geometry, I started to read a number of books and I followed a lot of information. But I think the defining moment came in 2000 when I attended a Flower of Life workshop where we were instructed by one of Drunvalo Melchizedek's local people who ran the courses. That information that was given in that course really opened my mind to I need to learn about sacred geometry. And then it was interesting, once we bought this company, my guide said to me, "You're going to be drawing some patterns. You're going to need your drawing materials, keep them next to your desk." And I did. And it must have been about a week later. Now, understand that I do not have any special drawing tools, or I cannot work on a computer, being the older generation. I literally have to do it by hand. And the very first drawing came through, and it was influenced definitely, and it was being confirmed by Archangel Michael. And that particular tachyon signaled a turning point in my life. And I found that I was understanding more and more and more about how the sacred geometry affects the body. Because in my studies, I discovered that there is sacred geometry in absolutely everything around us. If you drew some blood and you put it under a microscope and you let it dry, you would see small octahedrons in the blood. And that is what, as your blood whizzes around your body, you have the iron molecule and the oxygen molecule attached to each tip of the octahedron shape as it whizzes around in the blood. But obviously, these are very, very, very tiny. I mean, they're not. These are not big things. I expect you could say they're on the nanoscale. Similarly, if you start melting um, silver, you're going to get octahedrons showing in the actual shape of the molten metal. And so it goes that as you look at certain plants, you're going to notice the way in which they grow creates a Fibonacci spiral. Um, these are all part of sacred geometry. And the more you become aware and the more you study sacred geometry, the more it opens your mind, almost like a flower, and you start seeing these geometric shapes in the world around you. Previously, you might have seen them, but it's never mentally connected and made a connection with you. But once you start learning about sacred geometry and you see how often it is repeated in especially nature, it becomes quite mind blowing. Everything is based on sacred geometry. It's in everything. It's part of everything. And so, because we're talking from an atomic scale through to, well, a nanoscale, atomic scale, to the actual normal physical objects that we work with, when you realize that everything has got sacred geometry in it at some level, it's actually quite, you begin to feel very small, if I could put it that way. And you begin to understand that the design that's behind the whole planet is just so beautiful and so, it's simple but complex, that there has to be a higher hand in it all. It cannot have just come out of nothing.
So when I studied sacred geometry, I saw that, and I haven't done much at all. I've only read maybe a book and a bit, and I've watched a few YouTube videos. But I saw it really explains the relationship between different parts, and I came to understand that there was something very magical in sacred geometry, in that the discovery, I would say, of irrational numbers came through sacred geometry, like the square root of 2, which is in a square of 1 unit by 1 unit. The square root of 2 would be the length of the diagonal, right, using Pythagoras. And square root of 2 is a completely irrational number, but it exists through this very special shape. And as you go deeper into it, you get square root of 5, and there's other more complicated irrational numbers that have a special meaning. And even pi, for instance, pi being how we used to define the circumference of a circle and the area of a circle. Pi was born out of that necessity, I would say. But it's a sort of irrational ratio. It doesn't conform to our understanding of mathematics. So there's some magic in sacred geometry, because to me it gave birth to these irrational numbers, or what we call irrational numbers, but there is maybe some higher logic that we're not able to perceive. So like pi, square root of 2, square root of 5 in the Vesica Pisces, and a whole bunch of other things that it's like a secret almost. Is any comments you have on that point?
Yes, and again, I came at it from a different angle than you did. I didn't come at it through mathematics. I came at it through the actual physical shapes. The shapes kind of spoke to me. So because I'm not a great mathematician at all, I don't profess to be mathematical at all, but I realized that these 5 platonic solids had so much meaning that, and as I learned more, I began to understand how, as these 5 shapes interact with each other, how important they were. And one of the first things that I noticed was a straight line and a circle. That's like the basis of sacred geometry, a straight line and a circle. And in sacred geometry, your straight line is male and your circle is female. And I was looking at it, and it suddenly, I looked at it and I thought, good Lord, that's binary. That is your computer code. So your computer code is actually based on the basis of ones and zeros, which are straight lines and circles, male and female. And that really rocked me, because I thought to myself, good Lord. So here we've got all this technology, and it's actually based on a straight line and a circle. And when you start combining straight lines and circles, it becomes extremely interesting, because in sacred geometry, very often your patterns will be a combination of straight lines and circles. And the way in which they are joined together gives you the shapes of your 5 platonic solids and then more. So once I discovered about the straight line and the circle, it kind of gave me a base to work off. And then at a higher frequency, when I was channeling that first design, it contained both circles and straight lines. And that, to me, I found very interesting, because then the next thing that seemed to come in were numbers like 12 or 6 or 9 or 8. And I realized that numbers had some place in sacred geometry. So this is before we became involved in the company. I was very involved in following the crop circles, which of course are sacred geometric, and in design. And I used to sit and watch these things after they'd been formed, and I would find them not only fascinating, but very interesting. So when we got our first design for our first pendant, it was almost as if it was a 3-dimensional design, because when I had to draw it, or when I was instructed to draw it, I was given the picture, the actual sacred geometric picture. I was given it in layers. So I was given one point and I had to draw that. And then everything stopped and I got no more information. And then I waited. I think I went outside. It was summer. I came back in and the next level dropped in. And when you look at that very first one, you almost from a side can see that there are like there's almost a 3-dimensional level in it. And with the subsequent designs, the first 5 tachyons, all of those were channeled. The next 4, as I said, came from those 3 books. They were where I was seeing sets of numbers, but I was seeing them in the form of a pendant where we could wear those numbers. And what is interesting is in those 4 orbs of us, I call them of sacred number, a lot of those, 3 of those, are very ancient Tibetan symbols. So you have, for argument's sake, the Sri Yantra. Sri Yantra, of course, is very well known in certain religious circles, but it doesn't have it transcends any religion. But what is interesting is your Sri Yantra are all straight lines. But when you superimpose circles on the Sri Yantra, it will draw you the flower of life.
Oh, wow. Because I've learned to draw the flower of life using the circles, but you're saying also through a triangle you can.
If you do the Sri Yantras, you've got a set of triangles going upwards and a set of triangles going down. Now, if you look at each triangle, the base number of degrees alters as the triangles move up, and then the same as the triangles move down, that base angle actually alters on it. It's not static with each of the triangles. And as it was explained to me by a really interesting chap that I met long ago, he was explaining that as you meditate with the Sri Yantra, for example, and you grow yourself and you raise your frequency, you are working through each of those triangles, and as those base angles alter, you and your frequency raises, you are moving up in that level of triangles. So you're either coming down, which is your one way, and then the other, and then of course, sorry, you've also got the triangles going up. But right in the middle, you've got a tiny little dot, the bindu point, which which is the heart, which is where you are always moving toward. So using a sacred geometric, a Sri Yantra as your focus for meditation, you could use the flower of life. And it's very interesting that the flower of life are all circles. But when you break them down in the way that Drunvalo Melchizedek teaches you, there are straight lines as well, because he talks about the God self, source of all, being in nothing. And that God self or source of all decides that it is going to move from point A to point B. But of course, because there's nothing, there is no point A, there is no point B. And to manifest a point A, source moves in a circle. Once this, I'm going to call it, once it has described a circle, in other words, it projects its consciousness out as to a limit, and then it proceeds to project its consciousness out, and then it joins the end of those straight lines, it defines a circle. Once Source has defined one circle, it says to itself, wow, if I've done that, I can do it again. So it moves to the edge of a circle, the first circle, and it now makes the edge of that circle the middle of a new circle. And so it creates a new circle. And Source then continues to create circles. And if you equate it to the ancient Bible text in which God made the world and all that is in it in so many days, you equate each circle to a day. And exactly at the halfway point is when the world, in terms of the Bible, was half made. But the interesting point is after that first circle is drawn and the second circle is then drawn next to it, there is an area of overlap in the two circles. And it's that area of overlap which is called the Vesica Pisces, and it is shaped like a fish. Now, if you think of the early Christians had as their motif a fish shape. And if you think of the two circles overlapping each other, you've got a fish shape even with the little tail. And it's actually only two circles. So when you look at your fish shape that the early Christians used, I have to say to myself, were they taught some sort of basic sacred geometry in their teachings? I do not know. But it is very coincidental. In fact, it's beyond a coincidence that they're using that specific shape. And your vesica Pisces, that overlapping of two circles, is probably one of the most important shapes in sacred geometry. Because if for a moment you can imagine two circles drawn on a piece of paper, which is two-dimensional, where your vesica Pisces occurs, if you could imagine that that has another circle, a third circle, but it's rotating not on a flat plane, but in a plane that is at a 90-degree angle, and you have a third circle. You look at that vesica Pisces, and it's the shape of an eye. And what is perceived through the eye is light. So according to Drunvalo Melchizedek's teachings, your vesica Pisces is how light enters into anything. Your vesica Pisces is the mechanism through which light comes. And it's very interesting in that Archangel Uriel is connected to the vesica Pisces. He's known as the Archangel of Light. Now, I know different people might have different interpretations on that. I'm not here to say that that is categoric. It's an open debate. I can't prove that, but that is what I have learned. Is that Archangel Uriel will manifest light through that vesica Pisces. And so that is a very important shape. And then, of course, if you go through and you make a full flower of life, it equates to the 7 days of making the world. If we go further and we look at the full flower, all 19 circles, the interesting thing of where that particular design was really discovered properly was on the temple of the Osirian in Egypt. Now, the Osirian temple is surrounded by a lot of mystery. Nobody knows who built it. It is much older than the newer temples in Egypt. It is semi-flooded. And there is a section of this temple that is built from granite. And if you get yourself to sort of where these two big lasered pictures of the flower of life are lasered into the granite, you've got to kind of walk around a corner, but there's a lot of water there, so it's very difficult to photograph. But here you have a temple that is so ancient, nobody knows how old it is. And into the side of the temple are two lasered, full lasered, they're enormous, flowers of life imprinted into the granite. Again, now you're surrounded with ancient mysteries. How did the ancients, from what we've been told, and we know a lot of what we've been told is not true, where did the laser come from? There must have been that technology available for them, A, to build out of granite, which is one of the hardest rocks on the planet, and then secondly, to laser it. And there are these two beautiful flowers of life. And for anybody who has studied the flower of life, you will know that all five platonic solids are coded into that flower of life, as well as the traditional um, tree of life shape, the long tree of the traditional tree of life shape. It's also encoded into that particular flower of life. So the flower of life, I think, was left for the generations that followed to actually find the encoding. And once the encoding was discovered, then people realized the significance of these two lasered impressions on the Osirian walls.
That is so much for my head to get around. I'm still stuck on what you said about the binary relation or the binary structure of sacred geometry, you know, the circle and the one, or the circle and the straight line, because that is actually what sacred geometry is. I mean, I've got my little compass kit, and all you're doing is drawing straight lines, either like that or at angles, and you're drawing circles. But yes, sometimes the lines are like that, and sometimes they're angles if you're doing a hexagon or a pentagon or something. But you're literally just using lines and circles, and maybe the circles are bigger or smaller, but that's your only tools is circles and lines, and that can create the most complex sacred geometric shape, but it's just built of lines and zeros or a binary base structure. That is absolutely fascinating, because I really feel there's so much information that is held in these shapes. And again, when we're drawing it, we're drawing it two-dimensionally, right? But in nature, in reality, it's a three-dimensional structure or shape. So it's even more amazing, because we're just drawing it on a paper and it's flat and it's 2D. But imagine it was a three-dimensional shape, how much information is in there.
But think about this, Deepak. When you draw something two-dimensionally and it has a vibration, I would postulate that it actually becomes a very much higher dimension drawing, in that we do not have the ability to see it, because we tend to see what is in front of us, and we are used to seeing a three-dimensional shape. But I do believe if you have the ability to see into the higher dimensions, that two-dimensional shape will actually be it will evolve into a very much bigger shape as the dimensions move, as you move into the higher dimensions. That is just simply my own feeling about a drawing.
That is so amazing. And the Vesica Pisces, if you've dug anything into sacred geometry, you'll come across the Vesica Pisces. It's like literally spoken about in all the sacred geometry books I've come across. They speak about it as being such an important shape or a symbol. And I believe the old Christians, is not coincidence at all that they had the fish shape as their symbol. That's not coincidence in my view at all. That is an understanding of the Vesica Pisces and its meaning and what it implies and how it created. Because like you said, it's created through the circle, and the circle moving from the first circle and the second circle starting its center point on the edge, right? So it's a very structured process that Source followed to create. It's not just random, you know, it's not just like things going here and things going there, things being different. It's a very structured process that's repeated in exactly the same exact precise way. And that process is what creates the Vesica Pisces, the flower of life, the tree of life. And then, like you said, it's encoded all the plutonic solids, the four plutonic elements, and so many more things. I know there's Metatron's cube, and there's so many other amazing shapes encoded in this information. So there's so much information there, we're just not able to perceive it. But this is where the tachyons come in, is they have that ability to channel that information or that energy from 0 point through the tachyon into us.
Yes. If I can show you, I have a little tachyon here. This is a semisphere. As you can see, it's half a circle. And inside it, there is a spiral pyramid, which is imprinted into the tachyon. This little tachyon, although it is tiny, as you can see, it fits into the palm of my hand very easily. It's not big. I think it's about 30 to 35 millimeters in diameter. This particular tachyon puts out a field of 3 meters, a 3-meter dome over it. And that's all, that energy in the 3 meters, you wouldn't think would come from a small item like this. So that shows you that the tachyon energy isn't just stuck in the item that you have. It actually is giving off that energy all the time according to the geometric structures in it. And the color actually plays an important part as well, because the color also has a Hertzian frequency. So if there's a color in a tachyon or they're multicolors, you're getting the benefit of the Hertzian frequency of those colors as well as the 0 point energy. So the tachyons are color, shape, and then the tachyon energy. So you've got all 3 factors there which are influencing how your body reacts and grows according to that frequency. But correctly, as you say, the sacred geometry is almost the important aspect of how it connects with our body. That is, to me, the connection point, is the sacred geometry. Somebody yesterday asked me, what is the relationship between one pendant and the next one? And I explained to her that there is no relationship. It is simply your body now needs a new frequency, and that new frequency is provided by the sacred geometric drawing in the upgraded tachyon that you need. It is simply your body has raised itself to the frequency of your first tachyon, and now you need to go up a step. And so we dowse and we find the new frequency, and that is the frequency that we then propose that you move on to, so that you continually growing yourself in whichever way. And as stresses occur in your life, so there isn't a progression 1, 2, 3, 4 that you follow. You might have one particular tachyon today that's in the group, and in a year's time you need a tachyon that is 30, 40, 50 degrees off of angle from the first one, and that would be the right one for you. And then you might go back, and then you go forward again. So the sequence of the pendants as they arrived, that is not of any importance. The important bit is the frequency you needing, and the only way in which we're going to get that is from your higher self, because your higher self knows that at one point you're going to need this frequency. But if you now move into a situation which is extremely stressful, then your requirement is going to change. And that is where the sacred geometry comes in, that you have the very correct sacred geometry for your body to use to support your body.
That's beautiful to see how the tachyon sacred geometry relationship exists. And like I said, I've seen it through a lot of my work with the radionics charging up pellets and stuff. So how does, maybe this is something you might know. I've tried to figure it out, but I've seen through all these experiments that frequency can create a shape, and the same frequency creates the same shape when we have that Cialdini experiment with the salt or the sand. But can a shape create a frequency? Because can it go the other way? How can a shape create a frequency?
Well, simply think about this. If Okay, I'm just trying to think of the most appropriate shape that I could. So let us talk about the Merkaba field, which is nothing more than a star tetrahedron, or the Star of David, as a lot of people know it. We actually have in our auric field, we have a star tetrahedron. I don't know if you are aware of that. In fact, we have 3 star tetrahedrons, one on top of each other, in our auric field. It sits there and it does absolutely nothing until you learn a special breathing technique which activates that particular Merkaba field into an active Merkaba field, where you have one of the Star of Davids will rotate to the left, the center one remains still, and the right one will rotate in a counter-rotating field. So you've got one turning left and one turning right. So you have counter-rotating fields. And again, going back into physics, as soon as you get counter-rotating fields, you're getting superconductivity. Are you with me? So there you have a shape that is causing an energy. So your shape is the Star of David, and by using a breathing technique, you activate it and it starts to move. And when you're in that state, you're in a very, very high level state. That breathing exercise that Drunvalo Melchizedek gave the world is perhaps the most important thing that's ever happened to me. It accelerated my growth in the most amazing way. So a shape, and here I'm going to use 2 tachyons. So we have the little one that I showed you earlier, which is a semisphere. And here we have an igloo, which is multicolor. As you can see, it's changing color. This one has 8 sides, and this one, of course, is a perfect circle. And these 2, if you hold them, you will get totally different energies that you can physically feel as you hold them. They don't feel anything alike. So shape, the geometric shape, definitely causes a different frequency. So, and then you have something like this rod, which gives off a lot of tachyon energy, but which, when you place it into your hand chakras, you have the most amazing meditation, because it's pushing this high frequency energy into your body. So the shape is what causes or results in the frequency, the level of the frequency, the Hertzian frequency.
Mm. And the quality of the frequency as well. That's why when you drink high vibration water or the radionics, which has got a high vibration frequency, it has some sort of impact on you. I believe that somehow that frequency, which is stored in the shape, like when you take high frequency water or high frequency food or the radionics medicine, they have a shape stored in them, different sacred geometric shapes. But as your body absorbs that food and nutrient, I feel the vibration is then what comes and vibrates through your body and, just moves through. It's like a sound. We can't hear it with our ears, but it's a sound that is now moving through our bodies based on what we're consuming.
That is absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct. Tachyon is just, it's one way of introducing frequency medicine without you having to um, physically take anything. You literally just keep it on your body. You don't have to worry about, is it going to affect the physical, the mental, the emotional, or the spiritual body, because it does it automatically on its own. You just simply wear the thing. But it's altering your beingness, and you find that, well, as one young man said to me, since I've worn this tachyon, um, people are so much friendlier. People are talking to me and they're being nice to me. And I said to him, were they different before? And he said, oh, yes, people used to be very ugly to me. And I smiled and I said to him, have you thought that perhaps it's you that's changed? And because you've changed, that's why people are being different towards you. And he said, good grief. He says, I never thought of it. And he says, and if I have to admit it, I have changed a lot. And I think that really does sum it up, because the tachyon's working at a level that's very subliminal. It's very quiet. It's initially you feel that energy really strongly, but as you're wearing it, you become used to the energy, and you just find that you're a quieter, calmer person. You're able to cope with things a lot better. Um, when people come for a tachyon healing or attunement, as we call it, um, they'll come in at one vibration and they leave at a higher vibration. You can very often see it. They walk in, they're stressed, they're pale, they're not looking well at all. When they leave, they've got color in their face, they're full of, they might be a bit tired because they've released a lot of stress that they're carrying, but they leave in a higher vibration and usually much happier than when they came in. You can literally see the difference in their beingness.
So, on that note, we have come to the end of our podcast. So, Mary, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and helping to explain such difficult concepts. You made it really easy to understand. I really understood. And the binary thing, I think, is going to haunt me for the rest of my life now that I've understood the secret dialogue or language, of sacred geometry. But to all the listeners out there, sorry, Mary, carry on.
I said it's the secret language.
Yes, that's right. So to all the listeners, the Tachyon attunement session, I went to have one with Mary and it was absolutely amazing. I've done so many spiritual sessions or work over the years, but this one was really, really special. I came in high vibration and I came out even higher vibration. Mary took me on an amazing journey, meditation, choosing tachyons, connecting with my higher self, and it's really, really special. So all the details are below this video. Please go to our website. You can get in touch with Mary. You can find out more about all her products. Tachyon is just one of her products, but she's got a whole range of different energy products, pendants, crystals. They're just amazing, amazing products. Very high quality, imported from Germany. I think the tachyons are imported because they're made by a very special machine. So really amazing quality products. Go check her out, go support her, and go get yourself a tachyon attunement. It will change your life, I guarantee it. Mary, thank you again so much for your time and wisdom. We have learned so much in this time with you.
Deepak, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Well, till next time, everyone. Ciao for now.